And one of the things that I do, and I don't know if other artists do, is that I spend time observing the people that are attending the opening.
Yeah.
I want to see if they actually, what paintings are they engaging with?
Mm-hmm.
Are they engaging with my painting? Or why are they just walking by my painting and then really spending time looking at the painting next to me, to mine?
All right, Robert Brodesky. Brodesky, okay. Robert Brodesky. Sorry
right.
for the, I've been calling you by the wrong name.
Well, actually, I mean, it's a common error. I'd say probably 7 out of 10 times I get called Brodsky.
Yeah.
But it is Brodesky.
Brodesky.
Yeah, and I used to work in a corporation in Denver, and the administrative assistant for the department would tell people it's desk with bro in the front and Y
at the end.
Y at the end.
Nice, Brodesky. All right, I'm going to say that a few times and try to get it to sink in.
All right.
So you recently had a show here. I thought it's been very well received. Your figurative paintings, and a little bit about you. Like, where did you're originally from? New York.
Yeah, I grew up in New York. I grew up about 30 miles east of New York on Long Island, in a town that is known for being the gateway to Jones Beach. And so maybe some people have heard about Jones Beach. It's a large, very, really beautiful beach on the south shore of Long Island. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so pretty close to the water.
Yep.
Similar to people living in Scituate.
Nice. Now, was there a big art community there when you were growing up, or?
I have no idea.
No idea.
If anything, in high school, if you were interested, I never took any art classes in high school because generally it was, the kids that just really didn't care much about anything.
Yeah.
And there were always stories about how they locked the art teacher in a storage room.
Yeah. Sounds like an interesting place to be.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't take any high school art classes. When I was 15, my parents decided that it was time for me to take some art classes, and they were originally from New York, and they were familiar with an art museum, the Brooklyn Museum, and they had an art school. And so I would take the train in every Saturday morning, and starting when I was 15 until I graduated high school.
So the art was it was important for your parents that you get an education in art?
Yeah, it was real important. They were very interested in the arts just to begin with, and maybe particularly somewhat unusual for the time and for the location. But they were very good about taking my brother and me to the city to go to museums and go to plays and that kind of thing. In addition to that, there had been a history of from generation to generation in my family of people painting. So I had a grandmother that painted, and she lived in Arizona, but she would send me paintings that she would do just for me, which was somewhat inspirational. And then she told me that her father, who I never knew, had gone to college to study art.
So no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that art's important, and it kind of gets overlooked sometimes in families, but now I'm thinking about it, making sure that you kind of, that you're a good role model to the, to your children, and exposing them to that is probably, a place we need to hit on to encourage the arts.
Yeah, I try to be a role model in that regard, but I'm not sure how interested my children. I have two children. My daughter seemed to be somewhat artistic a little bit. She took some classes in high school. But she really hasn't done anything since then. My son showed no interest while he was growing up, particularly, but now he's one of the best judges of my artwork, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think that you have to necessarily have that, be producing art, but like to appreciate it and to appreciate it, or to like understand it a little bit, or like the idea of creativity is probably that's probably more the important thing to impress on your children, right?
Yeah, definitely.
In the next generation.
Yeah, so it's interesting for me in terms of how my children, have turned out with regards to my artwork, what they take in, what they don't take in, whether they ask me about my artwork or not. They walk into the house and they say nothing or they want to engage. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, and particularly with my son, I didn't expect that of him, but he's far more interested, and he's very perceptive when he looks at paintings and has good commentary.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have somebody you rely on, and whether or not you want to hear what they say.
Yeah.
And you're also a part of a group we were touching on. Would you Tech?
It's called TECM, and I can't tell you what it exactly stands for. So it's sort of interesting, and I'll backtrack a little bit. I used to live a long time ago in Baltimore. This is after graduate school. And when I was living there, I became good friends with a married couple, David and Adrian, and they were originally from Massachusetts. And they were living in Baltimore because Adrian was getting a graduate degree in painting at the Maryland Institute of Art, and so she and I, they eventually got divorced. She and I remained friends. She and a number of other people went to college and got BFAs in painting at, what's it called? It was called Southeastern Massachusetts Universities, which is now UMass Dartmouth.
Yep.
And these people who were in class there together remained close, and they formed this group where now, in the last several years, people get together quarterly to look at artwork, critique, and just sort of schmooze and eat and have fun.
Yeah.
So I got invited in, even though I didn't go to college there, partly because I knew Adrian, and then it turns out that one of the members in the group lived about a mile away from me, and we got acquainted and got to know each other.
Yep.
So I'm actually the only person who didn't go to college with these people that's in the group.
Nice.
Sort of odd, but it works.
And you get good feedback, or
Yeah, generally I get really good feedback. I think the first time I went to one of their meetings, one of the members basically chewed me out and told me that I wasn't challenging myself, and that I needed to do better than I was doing because I was talented. And she was not very, very nice. And she actually said, well, I can say these things because I'm a bitch. And it was a bit off-putting. And eventually I found out that many of the other members overheard this conversation and thought, oh my gosh, what is he thinking about us, probably. Yeah.
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 But do you think it helped?
I think yes and no. I mean, I think part of the problem, and this is something that I face as an individual, is that sometimes you allow people to get in your head.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily a good or positive thing when you do. I mean, you really have to be self-directed. You have to know what your path is, and you need to be able to discern what is good and what's not good, and what do you want to take in.
Yep.
One thing that I keep coming back to, and this is sort of maybe a little bit morbid, but when my father was dying and he was high on morphine, the last thing he said was, "Don't let him get in your mouth," which has some deeper meaning for me in terms of our family relationships. But I try to remember that because that is an issue for me. I have over time let people get in my head in a not necessarily a positive way. And so that then after that incident with that woman, it did affect me in terms of how I was looking at my artwork, whether or not I was ever satisfied with what I was painting at the time. And it took a while for that to dissipate.
Yeah. Will she know who you're talking?
I don't
if
think
she hears it.
I don't think she'll listen to the podcast. And she knows this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she knows this.
Yeah. Interesting. And then you said you also had you told me you had a mentor that was kind of important, Steve Gilbert.
Yeah. So I don't have an art degree, which was sort of interesting considering, I knew I wanted to be a painter. I wanted to be an artist since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
My mom even told, I don't even remember this, but she told a story about how I was sick in bed, and I was 4 or 5 years old, and she walked in and I had paint all over the linens and everything. And, so, the inclinations have always been there. I went to a state university in New York. At the time, it was relatively small. Their art program wasn't very robust. And I guess I was somewhat uncertain about, did I want to declare art as a major, studio arts as a major. So I didn't really, I didn't take a painting class until I was a senior. I took 2 semesters and was taught by the same guy. I guess he had somewhat of a reputation and maybe in the 50s and 60s in New York City. And I thought after that experience of working with him or having him as an instructor that I never wanted to paint again. He would come around and he had nothing positive to say about my work. And he would say things like, there's no adventure in your life. So there's no adventure in your paintings.
Yep.
So in retrospect, maybe he was trying to challenge me.
Yep.
But once again, it got in my head.
Yep.
And eventually I, really thought, well, maybe I shouldn't be painting or I don't want to paint. A few years later, I'm living in Baltimore and there's this really good art school, Maryland Institute of Art. They have a evening program. And I decided, well, I'm going to register for a painting class. And I went to the first class and I sort of freaked out and I said to myself, I'm going to drop this.
Yeah.
And then,
were you taking other classes there too, or?
I had been. I had taken a life drawing class that summer, so right before the painting class. And so I dropped it and I picked up a drawing class. And then I said to myself a week later, why am I doing this? What I really want to do is paint. So I picked the class back up. The instructor, this guy Steve Gilbert, came up to me and he said, what's your deal? You're here 1 week, you're gone, and now you're back. You picked up my class. What's your issue? And so we talked, and I told him about my experience in college. And he said, look, I'm not the same person, and I'll make a deal with you, and the deal is I won't talk to you until you're ready. So I eventually approached him, and I said, yeah, would you talk to me about my artwork? And he was very encouraging. He opened up some avenues. He told me one of my issues is that I'm trying to paint on these small canvases and that I should go out and get myself some large stretchers and go to cheap paints, get some cheap paint brushes and just get started. Yeah. And because of all that, what he said or the direction he pointed me in, things just opened up. He saw something, he realized something about how I needed to work. And at the end of the semester, he told me that he wanted me to come back, that I shouldn't bother to register, which wasn't the right thing for him to be saying. But he said, please come back, because he wanted to work with me, that I was very talented. So it really made a difference.
And up to working with him, you had been working on a smaller scale?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is that you go to these painting classes, and I'm just talking from my experience. They tell you to get like an 18 by 24 canvas or something like that.
Easy to transport, right?
Yeah, easy to transport. And, you're doing a landscape, not a landscape, a still life. Which is like, I don't care about still lifes. Really, I don't want to paint a picture with an orange in front of it. So I think that really sort of, was the part of the issue, was the size, but also the subject matter that, many of these classes where they sort of are directing you.
Yeah. Now you're primarily just paint figures at this point, or is that's all I'm seeing around here?
Yeah, it's primarily figures. It's interesting. During the reception the other day, there was somebody who came and asked me the same question. When I lived in Denver for 11 years. I went through a period of painting abstracts. Yeah, and it was okay, but it wasn't particularly engaging for me. Yeah. The principal reason why I did it was that Denver was booming at the time, and there was a lot of interest by corporations to buy art. Yeah. And they were buying abstract pieces. And so I decided, well, I'll paint some abstracts and maybe I'll sell some, which I did.
Yeah. But it just didn't feel.
It just didn't feel like me.
Yep.
Yeah, it didn't hold any interest. I mean, I think part of it is conceptually, where are you going with an abstract? And that's something that I struggle with, or mentally or physically can't leap to all that readily. Maybe that's true, but that's the way. That's sort of how I think about it at this
Yep.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you decided to focus on figures and
Well,
in faces, or
I had always been doing figures.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the time when I was 15 and I was going to the Brooklyn Museum. Unbeknownst to me, when I registered for it, I just thought, oh, this is a high school art class.
yeah,
Right before, like a few minutes before I left to go get the train to Brooklyn, my mom said, it's probably going to be nudes.
yeah,
And I was going, oh, you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah,
But she was absolutely right.
yeah,
And I guess I've been engaged ever since, looking at figures, looking at people.
yeah,
I probably stare at people too long when I'm in a restaurant or on the street,
Yeah.
or even when I'm working out. Partly is, I'm trying to take in who they are, or just how they appear, their physical aspects of how they, their character. Yeah. Whether or not I'm going to continue doing figures, more than likely yes. But where I'm going next, that's always evolving.
yep. And how do you choose the the color palette or the subject matter?
It's interesting. I would say that years ago, my color palette was probably brighter, and it's gotten darker, and I'm not absolutely certain about that. I think it might have to do with the air quality. When I lived in Denver, the crisp, it's a dry climate, and it's very crisp. The air quality, the brightness is much more crisp than you have here in Massachusetts, which is partly due to the humidity, I would say. And I think that has affected how I perceive color and how I'm portraying, and how I'm using color when I'm painting. And then I've gone through a period of being very interested in black. Years ago, I would never even use black. I probably didn't even own a black tube of paint. And so in the last several years, I've just gotten really intrigued with black and how to use it, and I probably have gotten obsessive with it as well. I've had some people criticize me for the use of black, that it's too much. Sometimes my wife talks to me about that. People in this art group, Techum, I think, have criticized me for the overuse of black.
Well, at least it's not getting in your head anymore because you're still doing it, right?
Yeah, I'm still doing it. I like it, and you get to a point you do what you want to do. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I like the way that it has a real strong, statement on the piece, and I love the amount of texture and paint that's on your canvases. I think that it's, it feels like there's a lot of paint there, which to me, as someone that looks at a fair amount of paintings, it doesn't look like it's just built up without intention. It feels like you've been working on this. It has like I feel like it's been, it wasn't just thrown on there. It feels like this canvas has been worked over and worked over. And, I don't know if that's the case, but
well, a couple of things. It really is of interest to me. I look at some canvases and everything, it looks great. It's really a beautiful piece of work. And I go up to it and it looks like there aren't a lot of layers. There are these, very clear washes, whether it's oil paint or acrylic. Whereas, with my paintings, just like you just described, there is more thickness and a buildup. I would also say that maybe up to 6 years ago or so, I would finish a painting of this size or even larger in 3 days. I would just be able to work very quickly, and get to a point where I would say, okay, it's done.
Yeah.
More in more recent years, it's taking me much longer to finish a painting. I'm in a stage of wanting to do it even better than I did it, say, a year ago.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, there's probably more layering that's going on. There's a lot of wiping out and then recreating. And one thing that's always been clear to me, and this is partly goes back to my experience of working with Steve Gilbert at Maryland Institute, I go through a process of creating and destroying, and then recreating, and then destroying and recreating. And unfortunately, there are probably times within that process where whatever I've created is pretty good, and I should have left it alone.
Yep.
But
knowing when to stop is
yeah. So I would say years ago I was much better in knowing when to stop.
Yep.
But I think the benefit of it is that I am creating these layers, and I am pushing myself to be a better artist than I have been.
Well, I think it's interesting, and then it kind of has this, I mean, you're trying to tell somebody's story, right? Or like, who these people are, and the multiple layers, and like, it kind of like is telling of a person, right? Like there's a lot to them, there's a lot behind them, a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you really don't even know who these people are.
Yep. Do you?
No, and I don't know who these people are. They're totally out of my imagination.
Yeah.
But what is their relationship to one another? How do they feel about one another? Why are they looking outward? How do they perceive the outward world, or are they concerned about how people might perceive them, and whatever their friendship or relationship might be? In some respect, I would say maybe the figure on the right looks a little bit like me, or even like my son. But I can't say that it's necessarily biographical.
Yes.
Yeah, so, one thing that people ask me frequently is, well, do you use models? Do you have a particular intent when you start a painting? And I might have an inkling of an idea where I like to go, but I don't necessarily know where I'm going to end up.
Yep.
So I don't remember exactly with this painting. It could have been that it was just going to be one face.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, I thought I could maximize the space, or I could create something of interest by having two faces.
Yeah. A lot of them are, singles, but I'm looking around too, and then there's a few, it's like 50-50 up here that are, some have, two people, some have one, or most of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a phase where I would do paintings of three people.
Yeah.
So what was that about? So is that really, you can say symbolically, is that related to the Trinity? But I don't know. Yeah, I was doing these paintings, and there were like a whole bunch of paintings of three people.
Yeah.
And I also was doing more nudes. Full body, you could see the full body within the painting. And in recent years, it seems like I've gotten more myopic and just doing these faces, big faces, oversized faces that are in your face, so to speak. Yeah.
Do people ask you about, like, who these people are to you, or, want the story behind them?
Yeah, constantly. People ask me, or, did people model for you? Do you use models?
Yeah.
And I don't. And I think that sort of throws people as to how can you just do this without, having somebody that you're looking at in front of you. And I think that having a model, an actual physical person, is a distraction, at least for me, in terms of doing the painting. So I'd rather work without it and just see where the painting goes. I like to get to a point with my canvases where the canvas starts to talk to me and sort of give me messages or dictate as to what needs to be done next.
Yeah, so you're applying and taking away some paint, and then you see something and you're like, this is where the eye goes, or
Yeah,
this is
yeah, right. Or for whatever reason, I decide to put this yellow in the painting, and then I realize, oh my gosh, the yellow throws everything off, and I really need to make a change, and I need to do something different, or I need to apply a different kind of color. So in some respects, I would describe it as problem solving.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I think about, so I have a graduate degree in city planning, of all things, and and one of the things that we were taught in city planning in the curriculum is the whole concept of systems planning. So if anybody knows about systems, if you change one thing in the system, then a lot of other things are going to change, and you have to be aware of the ramifications of making that change. So I constantly think in those terms when I'm painting. So what is the actual system of the painting, and then if I'm, like I said, if I add the yellow, what does that then do in terms of the piece of artwork?
Yep, that's interesting that you. So, do you think that both things help each other? Do you think that the art helps with the city planning, or do you think the city planning helps with the art, like you're just saying?
Well, actually, I didn't really do city planning per se. I ended up being a transportation planner, and then eventually evolved into a transportation management consultant. And I would say yes. I would say that the way I looked at resolving various projects that I was involved with was sort of from a conceptual perspective, in terms of trying to know where you're going, but at the same time knowing that there are things that will happen that you can't anticipate, and that you have to be able to react to them, but then also know what the ramifications might be.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like art kind of, understanding art, or like, it's like, it helps in like solving problems, and like, this, just because you study art doesn't necessarily mean you have to like go into an art field, but I think you're like learning how to like learn things or look at things differently or think differently, which is such an important part of any job, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then it's also doing art as a way of solving your own problems. Working out your own issues. And maybe my paintings are a lot about working out my own issues. So.
If it's working,
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, I think that we had last week we had people in to see the stuff. It's been on display for I should have brought the card up, but I think we'll be up for at least a few more weeks, right?
That's right. Into April.
Into April, and I think people can come in, see it. I think it's. I've talked to a number of people from South Shore where you show a few of your pieces, and when they see when you see one of your pieces in the art center surrounded by a lot of other people's work, I don't think it's the same feel as seeing a whole grouping of your work here. I think it's nice, kind of to have just your work.
Well, it's interesting when one of the comments that I got after the reception, or even during the reception, was that people would say, "Oh my gosh, there's a body of work." And you could really see that body of work here at the Frame Center. Whereas, as you were just saying, people are just seeing one piece at a time.
Yeah.
So it's not, really the full impact of what I'm doing or what I've accomplished.
Yeah.
In terms of the South Shore Art Center, I'd like to think that even in those shows, my paintings stand out. It's interesting because many of those shows, the diversity of style is really is very vast.
Well, I think seeing these pieces, because I have the luxury of walking through on a daily basis. When you see one and then with another, it's like you can start to think, well, I like that one, but I like what's going on in this one, and then it brings you back to the first one, and you're like, well, trying to choose my favorite of the group has been a challenge, and I don't know. I don't think I'd be able to do that if I was just looking at one piece. I would, because you're judging it against other people's work. Whereas seeing all your work here, it's like, well, this one's my favorite today, but I like that one over in the corner.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I'll go to an opening at the South Shore Art Center. I have a painting in the show. And one of the things that I do, and I don't know if other artists do, is that I spend time observing the people that are attending the opening. Yep. I want to see if they actually, what paintings are they engaging with? Mm-hmm. Are they engaging with my painting? Or why are they just walking by my painting and then really spending time looking at the painting next to me, to mine? Whereas at the reception, what I saw quite a bit was people actually studying the artwork, just like you were describing, going from one painting to another and really looking at them. And which I think was the great benefit of being able to pull a body of work together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been fun, and I'm still trying to decide my favorite. I have a new favorite now.
Well, which one is that?
I'm feeling green, the smaller one with the green face.
That's
I've been back and forth on a couple of them. I think that there was one piece that I told you I thought you should bring when I was at your studio helping you pack up for the show, and that was my favorite for a bit. But now now I've actually circulated to like a smaller piece, which is I found kind of different. I didn't think I would enjoy the small pieces as much. Just knowing your style is like big.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that that piece that you saw in my studio, and you said, well, why don't we take that and include it in the show?
Yeah.
About a week before, I was thinking of painting it over. It's like, but that's not to say that when I finished it, I liked it.
Yep.
And in fact, it was in a room in our house, just leaning up against the wall with the intention of eventually hanging it. Yeah. So it's surprising how one day you like a painting and then the other painting the next day you're not so sure about it, or you have other favorites.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I would encourage everyone to that likes the looks of your work or has seen your work at South Shore to kind of stop in and see the body of work together. I know you have an Instagram account. Is it pretty active or? Is that somewhere someone can go to see some more of your work?
Yeah, definitely. You can go to the Instagram account. I also have a website. I haven't updated the website in the last year or so. I would say, unfortunately, and this speaks badly of myself, I'm terrible with social media.
Yeah.
In some ways, I don't get it. Or I'm just too lazy to get it.
Yep.
Or too lazy to keep up the postings.
Well, I mean, I think the important thing is to keep on painting, right?
Yeah.
And has Claude set you up with a page on the Frame Center website, an artist page?
I don't know if he has or not.
Okay, we'll get rolling on one of those too, so people that are interested to see your work can kind of click through the Frame Center website and get pointed in the directions of your social media and. I know everyone here is a big fan of your stuff, so we'll continue to promote it. And,
you guys have been great. I've appreciated everything you've done. I've been associated with galleries over the years, and I have to say you've done more in terms of actual marketing and social media, and I really appreciate that. And as a result, I think that I've had more. People are probably on the South Shore a little bit more aware of who I am and what my artwork is. There have been a number of people of note that have, connected with me. So I appreciate that.
Well, that's what we're, we can't create the art for other people. We're here to help. I mean, frames enhance art. Frames, help things hang on the wall. So, we just want to help get more eyeballs on art and let people find what they love or what they connect with. And I'm excited that Dan connected with this piece and picked it up. I think it's awesome, and I know he's a fan of your work, and as are a lot of other people. So even if they don't buy, I know that people should come in and see it. And
that's right.
Form an opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and definitely the kind of feedback that I got on Thursday evening was just, really fantastic. I mean, it was great. I mean, it really, in many ways, was validating. As anybody who does art, paints, you do it alone. You're on your own, and you don't necessarily get any feedback unless you do have an opening and
Yep.
people are more are willing to really engage and talk to you. I mean, I had, some people who said, "Why aren't you showing in New York?"
Yep.
Or, "What's wrong with you? You don't do enough in terms of self-marketing."
Yep.
So it
It
was,
makes you think, right? You got to
yeah,
expand.
it makes you think.
put yourself out there and get the feedback and continue to
That's
take the
right.
next steps.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I don't really journal, but I do on my phone under the Notes app.
Yep.
I will write things down, and I was going back and reading what I had written not too long ago, which was in October. And back in October, I was thinking, well, where am I going with my artwork? I actually wrote about that.
Yeah.
And I would say this experience, the validation that I've received has really sort of helped me in terms of, feeling that I am on a path.
Well, that's awesome to hear too, because that validates what we're doing here, and I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming in and sitting down with me, and look forward to many more conversations at South Shore and when you're in here framing things, Robert.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.